everybody to another video. I just can't help being obsessed with Jim Dale, who's a meteorologist who constantly, almost every day, appears on either GB News or Talk TV or other stations and spouts off about climate change. And he does it in a pretend authoritative way, but when you examine what he says, it's totally absurd. And in this particular video, I'm pitching him against two intelligent ladies, one of whom is Hartley Brewer, who is very sceptical about what's being said by Jim Dale, and Nana Akua from GB News. Both are lovely ladies and both on the right side of this issue. Very sceptical, but sceptical with facts. What really annoys me, of course, is that both channels do not put reasonable people against Jim Dale. They put people who are really not very knowledgeable on the subject. So here I am to try and put my dissection of these interviews as best I can and take some of the pigs from them and give you some of the facts and evidence behind the absurdity, the delusions of meteorologist Jim Dale.
Now, a serious emergency has been declared in Scotland as Storm Babet continues to batter the country. 2 deaths have now been confirmed as a 57-year-old woman was swept into a river and a 56-year-old man was hit by a tree while driving. In Aberdeen, police are also searching for a man trapped in a vehicle in floodwater, and the Met Office has warned more rainfall is to come, while rivers have risen to more than 4 metres above their normal levels. Many schools are also closed. Well, still in the studio with me is Sam Armstrong, but also joining us now is Jim Dale.
So with all due respect to Sam Armstrong, who I'm sure is a nice chap, he's a journalist and political advisor, as it were. He is not in any way a person with detailed knowledge about the subject. So yet again, they put somebody who really doesn't have the depth to counter people like Jim Dale alongside. All the channels do this all the time.
This is horrific what's going on in Scotland. Those of us who have ever had their home flooded, as I have, I've got a basement part of my flat. We know the full horror of what that is when your home is so completely destroyed like that. Talk us through where this storm has come from and what it's caused by.
OK, so Babet.
Babet, sorry.
Babet was named by, I think it's the Dutch, actually, rather than the British. But
well, that's got to change.
Well, look, it's a cooperation thing between the Irish, the Dutch and ourselves. It came from the Canaries, down in the Canaries. Very hot temperatures there, record hot temperatures at the time of year. This is a couple of weeks ago. Sea temperatures more or less the same in terms of being right up there. So that's where it got its energy from.
So there we have the claim of the cause. Record temperatures down in the Canaries. Well, here's a report on those temperatures. Almost a record at the airport. So it wasn't a record, it was almost a record. But let's look into that further and read on. The maximum temperature recorded this Sunday, the 2nd of October, at the meteorological station at Gran Canaria Airport. By the way, airport is never a place you should put a temperature gauge to record ambient temperatures because it's subject to jets, traffic, all sorts of things. So, as I've stated before in many videos, you cannot use airports as records for temperatures because they tend to grow and get bigger and bigger over time, and the heat island effect gets more and more. However, let's carry on. First, remembering that record of 33.8 degrees centigrade. Taking the temperature of this place, that's the airport, at this time of year for the years 1981 to 2010, that's 30 years, this Sunday has been warmer than 99% of the days. Wow, what a way to explain it, because there's 11,000 days in those 30 years about, and so, around about 110 days have been warmer. It's meaningless taking days and comparing them to winter and so on. What a meaningless way to put it, but it sounds alarming, doesn't it? And so let's read on. According to the portal hoyextreme.com, which analyses atmospheric phenomena in the infrastructure, likewise it states that the minimum temperature recorded this Sunday, 27.7, is the highest minimum since October 1983, when it was 25.6. So congratulations, 1983. Quite a long time ago. It was almost the same minimum. But what about those maximum temperatures? And that's what we're talking about. Well, on this page, which offers various graphs and comparative analysis, which it didn't, by the way, it is stated that the absolute historical record of maximum temperatures At this station, that's the airport, it's 44.2 degrees. A figure that was recorded on Sunday, July the 13th, 1952. And to add insult to injury, of course, since 1952, when that airport was tiny compared to what it is today and the growth of tourism in the Canaries, one would expect the temperatures and the heat island effect to be much higher, not the opposite. But of course all this is meaningless. It's got nothing to do with climate. Climate is weather trends over many years, really long periods. And it can be, in some cases, you need 100 or 200 years to see the cycle.
First of all, floods there, so carrying a heavyweight amount of water, of rain.
So before he goes any further, this is the actual annual rainfall record for Scotland from 1994 to 2022. And that's only 28 years, a short period in terms of climate. But you can see there's not much difference. It's pretty level. There's no trend there. So in climate terms, we're not getting any more or less rainfall in Scotland. I call it extreme weather alarmism. They do this all the time, and it's meaningless.
OK, here's the question, you're all waiting for it. Is this weather, or are you going to claim this is down to climate change? Because we've never had storms or flooding before, ever.
Somehow, Julie, I knew you were going to say that. I don't know why. Anyway, look, I've already mentioned where this came from, OK, the heat that's involved. Now,
well, I've already shown that claim about the record heats in Canaries is absolute nonsense. But we're now going to cross over to Nana Akua in GB News, because she, like Julia Hartley Brewer, is an intelligent lady who doesn't fall for this sort of nonsense.
Well, I'm joined now by senior meteorologist at the British Weather Services, Jim Dale, also political commentator Lois Perry.
Well, so there we are again. They have a political commentator, Lois Perry, who does have some knowledge about climate change, and I think has the problem of thinking she knows more than she does, because she actually doesn't know the subject very well at all, but she thinks she does. And she's a nice lady again, but again not putting serious people against Jim Dale. And I'll point this out as we go through this.
Well, go on then. Well, talk to me about Storm Babet then. What, is it a he or a she, and why is it here?
It's a she named by the Dutch, but it's here because it travelled from the Canaries a couple of weeks ago, where they were having intense heat, record temperatures, both on land and around in the sea, and it gathered all that massive energy, and that energy started to move to the west of Spain, then the west of France, and it arrived here. It hit or was blocked by the high pressure over Scandinavia. This is the technical bit, if you like, and it's dumped nominal amounts of rain across many parts of the UK. You're seeing the pictures now. You use the word catastrophic. I'm going to say there is a climate change element to Storm Babet.
So you think there's a climate change element to it. Lois, what is your view on that?
Well, it's nice that Jim is saying element and that it's not all caused by us, because in the past when you come on the show, Jim, you said that it's all human-made climate change.
I never say that.
I just wanted to... Well, you have. Or
you have, Jim. I'm sorry.
I haven't.
It's like, yeah, OK.
I know what I say.
No, I know what you say as well. Hold on. You have said it. You've blamed most of climate change. OK, well, I'll give you a chance to defend that.
Go on. Lois, say what she's
Lois, finish off what you're saying, and then we'll come back to
OK, so I just want to make the point that, Jim talks a lot about the IPCC reports and documents, yeah? The actual documents, the actual report, not the summary or the press release, which is done not by scientists but by politicians and PR people with an agenda, has said definitively until extremely recently. I think the last report, the ones before that, said there was no evidence whatsoever of an increase in extreme weather events. And the most recent one said there may be a slight increase, but it was based on modelling, not actually looking at evidence. Because, of course, Jim, because you're a very technical guy, that things are done over a 30-year average, not because there's a storm or it's a bit hot somewhere else in the world. It has to be worked out and done over 30 years.
Well, that lady had a lot of that right about the IPCC report saying that, etc. But then she finishes up with something that's completely wrong, which is everything's got to be done 30 years. No. What's been claimed in the past is the minimum period is 30 years to look at any data. But if you're looking at, let's say, forestry here, if you look just over 30 years, you don't see the true pattern. If you look backwards like this, you do. It's the same for ice. If you look at Arctic ice and you just take it since 1979, there's been a decline. But if you go back further, because in the 1970s we had the very cold period to a peak, 1979 was the highest for over 100 years, well over 100 years. And therefore, if you go earlier than that, you get a lower ice cover. So unless you look at the right period for the right particular parameter, it's meaningless. So she's totally incorrect there. On the 30 years, you've got to look at everything over 30 years. That's simply not true, and she's totally misunderstood the technical aspects of that. But nevertheless, she did get the rest of that correct.
And there is no increase in extreme weather events, and that's according to the IPCC, and NASA supplies their data.
Yeah. So, Jim, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, how bad does it have to get before Lois and maybe yourself actually says there is a climate change element within this? I mean, we've got to look globally, not just out of what... This is our turn, if you like. The floods are our turn. You go and ask the people in those flooded areas of the UK, of which there are many, and it's building up, it's becoming a major, major story, 3 deaths. You ask them whether there's any climate change involved in this. Don't ask NASA, who are...
There we have it. Don't ask for the technical facts, don't ask for the history, ask the people who've just had their homes flooded. I mean, that is no basis to determine a climate change element in a storm. It's absolutely absurd. So again, let's look at some facts. Well, let's give a little bit of history here. The area has a long history of flooding, first starting in 1774, with water levels rising ever since. In May 1913, Brecon saw river levels reach 0.8 metres above road level of the River Street, whilst on October the 5th, 1920, the river levels reached 9 feet above the normal levels. By 1939, bottom flats were having water cascading through their doors and windows, whilst major floods also took place in 1951, 1957 and 1982. So, as is normal when you get lots of properties being flooded all the time, there are projects then that try to give flood defence, or projects that try to minimise the flood. And in this case, there was. Obviously, it's a long history there, so what did the authorities do to try to minimise it? Here is some information on that. The 16.3 million project was designed to provide a 1 in 200 year standard of defence and represented one of the biggest civil engineering projects ever undertaken in Angus. Despite this, some pump stations to remove surface water did not start automatically following floods in November last year. 2 of 3 pump stations aimed at removing the surface water from the town's River Street did not start automatically when the water was detected. So there are problems. You see, asking people locally, is there a climate change element to this flood, having had their homes destroyed, it's not the way to do it. I mean, do you expect them really to understand the history of floods going back 200, 300, 400 years? Do you expect that? No, you can't. But this is what this Jim Dale relies on as backup. I mean, that's ridiculous. And had I been there, I'd have pointed out the absurdity of that. He is being absurd. He's not going on data. He's just doing scare tactics. And that's what extreme weather alarmism is about. Scare tactics.
Massively on side as far as what I'm concerned. And the evidence is incontrovertible. It's as simple as that. The last 10 years particularly, all the graphs, all the temperature graphs, all the wildfire occasions, not all of them, but many of them, are unprecedented in what's going on. You had the floods in there as well. You've seen the pictures from Maui, from Derna in Libya. All of these things, just stack them together, join the dots.
Well. First of all, the first point, things like the forest fires. The data from the entire world by NASA on forest fires, forget America, which has got this huge graph I've shown before. The entire world, forest fires are less and less and less. But then he mentions floods in Libya, say. That was caused by dam failures after years and years of civil engineers warning the dams are in a bad state, they're going to collapse. Nothing to do with extreme weather in that sense. So when a flood came, which has happened many times, of course, the dams couldn't take it because they weren't being maintained in Libya. Nothing to do with climate. And this man is just going against every bit of historical evidence. But what he's trying to do is scare you, and he lives on this. His income comes from this, it seems. So I'm just amazed that he can get away with this.
Lois, and do you know what? We have this conversation every week.
Sorry, can you let Jim finish?
Yeah,
let Jim finish.
Isn't it? That's kind of immaterial. What we've got to get to an answer to is how we deal with this, irrespective of whether you believe it's man-made climate change or just natural
I'm sorry, I've got to pull you up on this, because you're moving away now from the notion that... I haven't finished talking, so you don't know what I'm going to say. But it does feel like you're moving away from the notion where climate change is man-made, and it sounds like you're accepting the narrative now that it isn't actually. Lois, respond, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jim, why did the monks in medieval England build floodplains?
Why did the monks go, sorry, where?
In medieval England, before fossil fuels were being used, why were floodplains built in medieval England?
I'm sorry, but it's a pretty meaningless way to try and come up with a counter-argument there, instead of pointing out the absurdity of what he's just claimed. She's claiming that floodplains were produced by monks in medieval England. She's being confused. What she means, floodplains are natural. So in a river, you can often get flat valleys, like the River Wye Valley near Hereford. It's very flat, and then you've got the mountains either side, and there's a flat floodplain. Floodplains are formed naturally by the geology and geography of the area, if you like. So that's how floodplains are formed. They're not formed by monks. What she's meaning is the buttons and the things to protect from floods were being formed by monks. That's true. So again, sort of half right, half wrong sort of world, but it's a rabbit hole anyway. What should have happened there is she should have devastated Jim Dale, just as I've done, on the facts, on the evidence. It never happens. It seems that, I don't know whether I don't know whether Talk TV and GB News put Jim Dale up on purpose because he's so bad at it. Maybe that's the lesson, but why don't they at least counter it properly? They have journalists, they have lawyers, they have all sorts of people, except people who know what they're talking about, to counter him. I just find that annoying, but then it causes me to make these dissections on video, I suppose. So it's just my way of getting rid of my frustration of watching this instead of screaming at the television.
If there was
I don't know
no
where you're getting this one
Just
from.
answer the question.
I don't know where that one's come from.
Don't worry about that.
It's actually massively news to me that monks have suddenly arrived and done their bits 10,000 years ago, whenever it was. I don't know. I'm clueless as far as that one's concerned.
No, hang on. What, could you ask the question again? And Jim, do you know the answer or not? What is the question?
Ask the question again.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make is floodplains have always been created in the United Kingdom for thousands of years. Why would that be? Why do you think that's the case? You know, if it's all because of climate change that's man-made from fossil fuels, why was there the need to protect from floods 1,000 years ago?
So there we are. She actually thinks floodplains are the protection. They're not. They're the natural state of the river, if you like, of the river. And the rivers over time flood and back, and it establishes a floodplain. It wears away the mountainsides even. It establishes a floodplain. Nothing to do with protection.
Look, as well as the climate moving, the weather moves with it as well. That's part of the equation. You've got to differentiate between the two. And what you're not doing is exactly that. You've got to be able to do that. So, yes, of course, there are catastrophic weather events, pure weather events, that do occur from time to time. There are catastrophic climate-induced events that are also weather events, the add-on, if you like, that occur. And that's what's happening. That's what's being mapped on now.
What's happening? An add-on climate event, or...? Yeah,
the add-on. This Babet has got part of that inherent in the energy that was put in as it started to develop in and around the Canaries. I'm trying to explain it in a very simplified way, that energy goes into the atmosphere, and then the atmosphere can hold more water, and once it hits a barrier, such as the high pressure over Scandinavia, all that water falls out, and hey presto, you get the type of events that you're seeing now in the news, people being flooded out, deaths occurring, businesses ruined, all of that. You've got to start joining these dots, and we've got to start looking at the remedies for this and what we can do to best survive.
OK, so are you saying that the CO2 in the atmosphere caused this, was part of what caused this chain of events? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am. Overall, yes, I am. It's part of the equation,
and when
not
you say,
the entire
when you
equation.
say part of the equation, what percentage would you attribute to it?
You can't...
I'm asking you, because you're saying part of it.
I'll give you the answer, and the answer is you can't say... that's 10% or 12%. It's a portion of. That will vary depending on the event.
Is it a larger portion than half in your head, or a lesser portion than half in your head?
To be honest with you, that's a sort of silly question.
Don't tell me my question. Listen, there's no silly questions. When people are asking you, you've made a statement. I'm asking you. You said a portion of it is climate change. So I'm saying, in your mind, how big is that portion?
I would say it's significant enough to cause what you're seeing now.
Well, there we are. Congratulations, Nana. You did very well there. She's quite an intelligent woman there, doing a really good job on Jim Dale. The facts are, of course, he's got no evidence for this at all, whatsoever, that this climate change... If you're going to look at the extra element, like because of CO2 and warming, etc., you've got to look over time to see it. And as we've seen earlier in this video, there's no more rainfall in Scotland than there has been in the past, as it were. It's just without any scientific basis that Jim Dale is making these claims, and Nana is doing a very good job at taking him apart. Very good, Nana.
That's where it is.
Can you give it like so? I could say.
I think scientists cannot do that. They're not going to say this storm gave that, and that's. You sometimes have to wait.
No, because you keep saying if it's a teeny portion in your mind,
it's enough.
Then that sounds like not very
much. Do you know what happens?
Are you saying a big bit or a small bit?
So this is what happens when you fill your bath. Up to the point of it overflowing, it's OK. And then you get that teeny little bit that goes over the top, and it's not OK. That's exactly what happens with climate change. That's what we're seeing in all instances in terms of globally what's going on.
I've had enough of this.
Your technical ability to explain stuff, Jim, is overwhelming me about baths and overflowing and stuff. So the IPCC, they're wrong, are they? The IPCC are wrong when they say that there is no evidence of any more extreme weather.
I don't even know where you get that information.
I want Lois to finish.
Yeah, where's
Carry on, Lois,
from?
sorry.
The reports, the actual reports, not the summaries, not the press releases. This isn't. I'll send it to you, Jim. That say that there's no very, very slight increase, very slight in extreme weather events. And if we're richer as a nation because we haven't bankrupted ourselves with net zero, we can protect ourselves with to protect ourselves
Lois,
from floods, things like that.
You're interested in protecting the cars and the vehicles. That's what you're interested in, the fossil fuel industry. That's where you are. You need to come back on side.
Well, that lady Louise does a very good job there, pointing out the IPCC reports. I wish she would stay with the technical facts, and she's quite right about that. But in actual fact, when you look at all the individual weather events, you actually don't have any pattern that's showing more extreme. It's actually less extreme. I'm going to explain why in the most simplistic terms we're getting less extreme floods, less extreme droughts, and so on. And the basic reason is this. When the planet warmed, and most of that was natural, by the way, since the Little Ice Age, as it warmed, it always warms, even the models agree with this, it warms from the ends, from the north and south poles, and warms in. The equator in that area doesn't change very much. The change is in the ends of the globe, if you like. And weather is about differences. If you've got planets, and we've got one, I think, with incredibly stable weather, that's because there's no differences in it. And so if you've got no differences in the weather, you don't get it. You don't get the wind, you don't get the movements, you don't get it. So as the planet warmed, you would get less extreme difference between the poles and the equator. Less extreme difference, and weather is about difference. Less extreme difference means less extreme weather. And that's why we're getting less and less extremes as you study all the individual subjects. Now, even the poor polar bears, despite what's being claimed about them, have grown since the 1970s, fourfold in numbers, mainly because we stopped shooting them in the 1970s as much. So Jim Dale is now just going on a pandering without any substance at all, no backup, just pandering on alarmism, extreme weather alarmism, saying join the dots, do this. When you do join the dots and look at the graphs, of course, you find out he's totally wrong.
We need a proper conversation about where we go with this next. Look at what's happening in the UK.
Well, I think isn't that what she's saying, though? Isn't that what she's saying?
She's saying the IPCC are somehow coming up with contrary information to what they actually are coming out with.
Well, let her tell you what she's saying. Sorry, tell us again what you're saying, Lois.
Sorry, the summaries that are written from the reports and then the press releases quite often bear very little resemblance or no resemblance to what's actually written in the report.
Do you know who writes the IPCC
Sorry, let her
reports?
finish.
Because there's a political agenda for the people that are doing the press releases and the politicians, and that has nothing to do with being green, and it's all about an anti-capitalist agenda. That's all it's about. If either you don't realise or you're complicit. This
is 164 countries that put the name to this. This is the most countries of the world. These are eminent scientists that actually put these things out. They're not a couple of people sat in the back of a wardrobe pressing buttons like they do on Twitter or anywhere else.
The science is saying what I'm saying. I'm saying the summaries and the press releases, but they bear very little resemblance or no resemblance to the actual reports. It's well documented.
Lois, you need to look around. You really need to look around the world and what's going on. What's gone on in the last 2 years?
Well, now that lady Louise has done a terrific job on pointing out that it's the IPCC's. That's all she's claiming are the facts there. But Jim Dale doesn't seem to understand it. So at one point saying he doesn't know about it, doesn't seem to understand even what the IPCC are saying. He obviously doesn't read the science. He just looks at the press releases, and then he goes on about the weather in the last 2 years. Look around what's happening. That is not a scientific basis to do it on, no matter what you're looking at. You've got to take the last 2 years, if you want to take them, and compare them to the last 500, if you like. Compare them to the past to see if they're different or not. And he's not doing that. But he obviously doesn't understand even as much as Louise here about the IPCC themselves. And as he says, these are the experts. But the experts have been saying there's not much difference. And in fact, there is a real political agenda. She is so right about that. Spot on. I couldn't have done a better job myself than she just did there against Jim Dale. Congratulations.
I mean, every time there's an event, even in this country, for example, 2 years ago, 40 degrees, this June, the hottest June ever, this September, the hottest September ever. Yeah, we missed a couple in the middle.
So there we are, Jim. You can use temperatures like you just claimed, hottest temperature, etc. 2 years ago. Yeah, taken at Heathrow Airport with the jets passing by. Or the next hottest temperature at that time that was claimed at an RAF station with tornadoes landing and taking off. Great. I'll tell you a good idea, Jim, for the future. I don't know why you don't do this. So I'm going to hand it to you free. Why not take the temperature a metre away from a 2-bar electric fire in your lounge? Because that could be a really good high temperature, a record even for the UK. Nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with the ambient temperatures, but this is what you rely on, scare tactics. And when people like Louise there challenged you on the actual data from the IPCC, the actual science, you weren't aware of it. At one time you sort of rubbished it, and the next part you say, oh, it's all experts doing it, not people in cupboards. So, Jim, you're the one in the cupboard here. You're the one who doesn't join the dots together. You're the one who doesn't look at any perspective on these alarmist predictions you're doing. But congratulations, you make a good income out of appearing on all these radio and TV stations, with this absolute rubbish. I'm sure you're a nice man, but I'm sorry, you're wrong. There it is, but I'm actually going to finish this video with a small clip from one of my previous videos, and it's based on the work of Tony Heller. He's a great climate skeptic, and has a great website and great YouTube channel. And it's showing you how they fiddle the temperatures, when they're going on about the hottest temperature, etc. Very short clip, and I'll end with that. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Based on the 1999 reports. So clearly the 1930s were hotter, and then it cooled, as we know, from the 1940s until 1980 when it warmed again. But clearly the 1930s were the hottest. But just 2 years later, in 2001, NASA have a new graph for the same period, and suddenly the 1930s are now cooler than today. But hold on here. I can hear the alarmist cry. You just compared global temperatures here to USA temperatures. That's not fair. But just to make the point, here are the USA temperatures adjusted, and it's just the same result.